Hello and welcome to today's video. Today's video is on the topic of why the Sensible Centre should stop using internet language. Before I proceed, for those of you who don't know, internet language is language that first originated on the internet, or language that is only likely ever to be used on the internet and is very unlikely to come across or come up in normal conversation. So an example of internet language would be a word like based, used to mean sensible or a person I agree with. Another example would be of a word that is only ever used on the internet. So an example of this would be white genocide. Based. You should stop using the word based. This is for multiple reasons, or a multitude of reasons. Other people use it, and it's a word that to your average normal person or person who is not as understanding of politics as you are, the word based may trigger certain emotions among the audience or the person you're talking to, because the word based has been in the mainstream media associated with terrorism and political extremism. That's a completely unfair characterization of the word based, but that's a reaction that someone might have. That's an association that someone might have when you use the word based. Instead of using the word based, what you should use is a word like awake, sensible, understanding. Or if you're using the word based to describe someone you agree with, someone who has interesting political positions or something like that, generally you should not be using the word based anymore, especially if you're a significant public figure. White genocide. Though it is arguable that the ethnic replacement of white people in their home countries could be argued to be a genocide, however, as we've seen with Andrew Bridgen MP, phrasing something that with words that have a link to something like the Holocaust is generally more trouble than it's worth. What I mean by this is Andrew Bridgen got fired or resigned, had the whip removed from him as a Tory MP, but in reality what he said wasn't that controversial. He shouldn't have it's probably ill-informed to do what he did and compare the vaccine rollout to the Holocaust. That was probably a stupid thing to do, and if I was him, I would be thinking I shouldn't have used those words, because it just wasn't worth the trouble he got. So if you want a replacement for white genocide, try ethnic replacement or something like that, because the word white genocide is a very strong word and it will have negative connotations with people, especially if you're talking to someone who isn't as aware of demographic issues as you might be. Red-pilled. I don't like this word because I think it's overused. What I would say is, if you're using the word red-pilled or the phrase red-pilled to describe that you have woken someone up or helped them understand a political issue, you should just use those phrases. Instead of saying, I red-pilled my mate, you should say, I've helped my friend to understand some key issues of our time. Black-pilled. You shouldn't be using the term black-pilled to describe how you're feeling. It sounds very juvenile and immature. Say that you're feeling depressed or you're feeling despair. That's generally a better choice of language than black-pilled, especially if you're talking in public. White-pilled. Instead of white-pilled, say you feel optimistic or you're hopeful. Don't say white-pilled, because, as I say, it makes you seem juvenile and immature. So use optimistic use hopeful. Use words like that to describe that you're feeling hopeful. Don't use the term white-pilled. The exception to this rule of not using internet language is in the instant that you're talking in public, but you're dog whistling to someone. So what I mean by dog whistling is you're using phraseology that means a certain thing in normal conventional English, but to a select few, the wording and phraseology of a sentence means something completely different. If you have a subtle code of dog whistling certain people in your audience, by all means use certain language. But what I'd suggest here is if you're trying to dog whistle audience members who you've already got pre-agreed dog whistles, it's generally a better idea to use language that is very plain and doesn't stand out, because the point of a dog whistle is that only a select few actually understand what you're saying. So you don't want someone to suspect that you're dog whistling people. So you want to use very boring language when you dog whistle someone, or you're dog whistling your audience. If you want to have language that is quite exclusive and only members of your community or following or audience are going to understand that language, I would suggest using academic language instead of artificially invented internet terms. The main reason is it just seems immature to outsiders, whereas if someone can't understand what you're saying because what you're saying is too technical, you're not going to attract negative attention. Whereas if you use a bunch of made up internet terms to express yourself online or wherever you're expressing yourself, people can normally find out what those terms mean. I mean, they can do the same for academic language, but I would argue that if your channel or your speech is full of academic language, the people who are at the speech and listening to the speech or whatever you're doing, and they're not the intended audience, what they're likely going to do is just ignore you, because let's face it, most people are lazy and most people aren't going to look up terms that they don't understand. Thank you very much for watching. Please check out the links below, and I hope you found this video helpful.